Welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I am your host, Rob Gauthier the ET Whisperer. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Any ideas or opinions expressed by myself, the guest, or a caller may not necessarily reflect the same opinions of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Enlightenment defined. It's the state of giving and receiving greater knowledge and understanding about a certain subject or situation. Evolution defined. The gradual development of something, especially from a simple to a more complex form. So what then is Enlightenment Evolution? The state of giving and receiving greater knowledge as we develop from a simple to a more complex human being, living on Earth for our soul's experience. Welcome now and join us as we explore our Enlightenment Evolution Hour together. Hey, everybody, this is Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer. Welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I'm your host, and today we have a beautiful guest, wonderful guest, Nicole Frolick, the practical mystic. She's got a lot of great insights and a lot of great stuff we're going to talk about, and we're going to have you guys open for questions at the end of the time. But before we get into that, we have a few announcements to make. First of all, we have an amazing lineup of people coming across. And I haven't gotten out the calendar and gone through the list of people that we have, but I'm going to do that for the next few weeks. Next week, we have William Piper, Stadia Pro Gaming, a dear friend of mine, my oldest friend, a brother of mine, and we're going to be chatting with him. The week after that, on the 13th, we have John Craig and Kama, who is an amazing couple who has developed an oracle deck of light language, and separately they both do their own independent stuff that's amazing. We'll be talking to both of them. A lot of information will be shared on that one, which will be beautiful. And John Craig's the one who I've been bragging about for weeks now, the person who's responsible for helping us get the look of the ET Whisperer and the Enlightenment Evolution to a whole new level. A great guy. The week after that, Jason Quit. He'll be here chatting with us about a lot of different stuff. On the 27th, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black Radio, will be a guest. And then we go into August, and on the 3rd, we have Gordon Goosenbury, who's a good friend of mine, a mastermind, a creator, an amazing dude. You'll love it. After that, we'll have Sadia Luna, who is an amazing lady who's been teaching spiritual energy, who has her own channel. Great person. We're going to talk to her. And on the 17th, the one and only Wendy Kennedy, amazing lady, followed by Michaela Sheldon, another amazing lady, followed by Sheila Sefi, another amazing lady. So we just have a whole group of energy that we've got lined up. And, you know, as we get into September, we've got Lee Harris and the one and only Kalina Angel, my lovely, dear, beautiful wife, who's an amazing channeler, who's an amazing human, amazing mother. Out of all the humans in the world, it is her I give the highest praise to. And I might be biased, but she is well worth all of that praise. She'll be joining us too in late September. So that is the lineup in the foreseeable future, and we've got lots of guests waiting to get their dates and times in, and it will be an amazing thing. With the ET Whisperer, the Patreon group is ones who support the show with their financial contributions, getting their 2 extra channelings per month. The Q&A session, a lot like the open forum here, but it's done in a smaller group, so a lot less questions. On the end of each month and in the middle of each month, we do a poll where everyone suggests topics, and we take every topic suggested and put it up for a vote in the community. Whatever wins that vote, Aridif talks about in depth and in long, lengthy experience of really, really in depth about one topic, which is amazing. They come in every month and they give financial contribution, and that's what clears the way and energy for this show to happen. So thank you, all of our Patreon people. Uh, we have our channeling classes at the end of the month. If you want to go to that, go to etwhisper.com/classes and make sure classes in all small letters. I learned that the hard way in sharing social media. If you capitalize the C, it takes you to the wrong page. But classes at the end of etwhisper.com. And if you want to get personal sessions, go to etwhisper.com/sessions. Go to etwhisper.com for almost everything. We've got our Discord link. We've got all of our social media links set at the bottom of the page under Rob's links at the very, very bottom. And on the top, we have our guest links. And our guest for today is a wonderful person. She runs the Enlightenment podcast, and she also does a ton of energy work, a ton of spiritual work, and has an amazing outlook. And I don't like to go too far into explaining who someone is. I think it better come from them than me. And I think the conversation itself is what really opens up the energy for the night. And so without further ado, I will bring in our guest for the night, Nicole Frolick, who is the Practical Mystic. Hello, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Nicole.
Rob, it's so good to be here with you. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm really, really excited about this one. I'm excited about all of them for different reasons. But for tonight, I really want to dig deep. And you're one of the few people in our community that I see doing the deep digs on a constant basis, nonstop, being true to yourself, being honest to everyone else, and really going through a lot of great things, which is all topics that we want to talk about tonight. But before we get there, I like to open up not in what's your story, because I know your story and I know you've told it 100 times in 100 different ways, but all the same principle. And I don't like dragging people through that because, that's the first question I'm asked on nearly every interview. So I get it.
hmm
What happened during your childhood, during your teenage years, your young adulthood, wherever in life that you were, that started opening up these experiences? What childhood things made you ready and available to open yourself up to these types of things? Share with us where that springs from and how that's created.
I think, when I thought about it, it's when you mentioned being true to yourself and my ability to navigate this journey while always maintaining an alignment to who I know I am deep down and not compromising who I am for the sake of meeting other people's needs of who they want me to be or who they expect me to be really stems from a very pivotal moment in my teenage years when I had just turned 16, and I remember I was in school. It was coming close to the end of the year. It was summertime almost, and sitting in my grade 10 drama class, and I announced over the PA that there was going to be an application if you wanted to for a lottery to go on an exchange program to Europe, to France. And I was living in Toronto, Canada. I'm born in Canada, and so I took a lot of French classes growing up, and I don't know what it was about that moment, but I looked at my friend and I said, that sounds fun. Like it's a lottery. So who knows who can get chosen? It could be anyone. And I don't know why, but I just really wanted to do it. And I did it thinking I'm never going to get picked. And it turned out that I was the only one from my school that got chosen for that actual exchange program, which was 3 months. I ended up actually going to Switzerland in the French speaking part. And the reason why this is so important is because this changed the trajectory of my life. I am most certain about it because I have tended to live my life in a way that I don't think most people would. And I don't say that in any judgment. It's just, it takes a certain amount of trust in yourself and courage in the unknown to kind of stray off, I guess, what society carves out the path for us to all walk along, which is go to school and then go to college or university or get a job and then, get married and have kids. And it's just this path that's already laid out for us that we're supposed to follow. And this opened my eyes up to a whole new way of understanding what was out in the world. Because back then, this was in the early 90s, we didn't really have the internet yet. Like, it wasn't a full thing. And so you didn't know what was over on the other side of the pond. And when my eyes were opened up to all the different cultures and the way that they lived too was so different from my childhood growing up, where, at any given moment, spontaneity, we're like, do you want to go to Germany or do you want to go to Italy? And it was just like, what? And it really kind of made me reconsider what it means to really live our lives. And so going through my life, I've made a lot of choices that I think took me in a much different path that became the groundwork for all of my experiences, which became my greatest teacher in everything that I teach. I would say 90% of it, if not more, comes from my own experience and what I've been able to harness through that experience in my own learning and teachings, and how I was understanding everything that was happening within me, around me. And so it gave me the courage, I think, to step out in a way that I understand in this community, especially when it comes to spirituality and the topics that we discuss. They can get really fringe. They can even go conspiratorial. It's difficult to really put yourself out there and go down this path. But I learned from that young age of 16 how important it was to stay true to me. And the decisions that I've made when I moved to the Caribbean and left Toronto, and I had so many friends I had to leave behind. I had family I left behind, but I always had to make that decision for me. And I think that's been one of my strengths that's allowed me to perhaps go deeper into this journey that is mine and be able to extrapolate everything that I've been taking from all of it.
Well, that's amazing. And you said Switzerland, correct? Where on your
Yeah.
they live in a much different way than Canadians do, than Americans do. They tend to be more open-minded about things in general. And obviously, it's not a homogenous country. It's actually a multilingual, multicultural country, which makes it even more beautiful. But they tend to have an open-mindedness about things and a sense of community. Do you think that was one of the driving parts as well?
Yeah, I found that so interesting too, that the girl, I'm 16, she's 16, my exchange partner, and she's speaking 4 languages. And here I am, I can barely speak French, and I've been learning it since I was like 8, and I'm just like, wow. And watching how she was able to communicate, and I think that's important, is this ability to open up and communicate with people in ways where the barriers for me were very much present, but for her it was just so easy. And I was so in awe about that. And I found that, when we actually open up those communication lines, we learn so much more. And I think for me, even though there was a language barrier, what I got from that was this desire to want to connect deeper and to learn so much more. My thirst for wanting to know so much more that was available to us in all different pockets of the world really initiated through that experience.
Well, that's beautiful, and it really is something. The internet brought this to a lot of people, and now the younger generation definitely have benefited from it. Although the internet's like everything else in your life, it brings good and it can bring not so great. But it's brought an understanding of cultural energy from a larger collective, so that when I was a kid. Probably 1991, 92. I was 11 or 12. An Indian family moved in, and they were Muslim. And like no one would talk to them, no one spent time. I lived in a pretty rich community, even though we were the poor family. And I knew what that felt like being the person left out. And my parents always taught me, respect people, acknowledge them. Um, So I did, and I made friends with their younger kid, and I learned a lot of great stuff. The food his mom sent with him every day was amazing because I always
Mhm.
help share that with him.
Mhm.
It was something unique and something that I learned that opened up, and it sounds like this was a great tool for you. So as you're going through and it brings you closer to the now time, what were some of those things that kind of led you to open up your channel on YouTube and open up your podcast?
Well, it always, I'd been interested in spirituality. Actually, it kind of started in Switzerland, like through that experience, because we traveled so much. And I don't know what it was about Gregorian chants and going to all the different churches, because I was actually raised Catholic, but I had such a strong aversion to it. And so I found it interesting that I felt so drawn to a lot of the different churches in Europe. They obviously, the energy there I seemed to really resonate with. And the mother of my exchange family, she bought me at the time like a Gregorian chant CD. And so I would listen to it and I was like, oh, like I don't know what it is about this, but it speaks to me. And I almost feel like I already know it. And so when I got back to Canada, I started meditating too. I would go and grab more music and I would just listen to it. And before I knew it, I was meditating and I just got interested in so many different things. Like alternative health, Chinese medicine. I was really into reflexology and colors and crystals, like all by the age of like 19, 20, 21. Like I was really into it. And so a lot of that kind of came very early on. I met a naturopath through a very sudden change in my health status. And that was very jarring to me. And working with her, she just so happened to be into past life regression and dolphin brain repatterning and using essential oils and a whole bunch of different stuff, homeopathic medicine. And so she became, I think, one of my first real big mentors that kind of she opened me up to the Pleiadians. I learned about the Pleiadians when I was 21, 22. And so this was like over 20 years ago because I'm 45 now. And she had Lee Carroll in her basement channeling like Cryon. And she's like, do you want to come? And of course, at the time, I didn't know who that was. And but I went, and funnily enough, I don't have much memory of it. I don't know why. I just remember sitting in the basement in a circle of chairs, but then everything else is like blacked out, which is really interesting to me as I think about it. But I got into it, and then you come out of it. And I had, like we all do, we have all got our dark side, and alcohol was part of my dark side, and clubbing. And I just would go through these phases where I would go into this heavy spiritual stuff, and then I really want to go back into like the dark side. And I kind of pendulated back and forth. But eventually, I had left the Cayman Islands, and I had left my business that I had grown there. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And I would just written my book, Inflexible Me. And like, this is the stuff that I love. I love talking about spirituality. I love talking about the inner journey of soul development, becoming like a better person, a better human. And I decided, you know what? I've just got to start talking about it, because I was really scared of speaking. Like I had probably one of my top 3 fears was public speaking. And so actually talking in front of a camera is just as difficult as talking in front of anyone else, if not harder sometimes. And so I had to overcome a lot of those barriers, but there was something inside of me that told me, you need to do this, because on the other side is so much of what you've been wishing for that you can't actualize until you get through this fear. And so I just started like throwing stuff out there, and I honestly didn't have a plan. I was like, let me just start talking about what I love and let me get more in touch with it. And that's kind of how my YouTube channel started.
That's amazing, and it's always beautiful to understand what's the mechanism, what's the build, and what's the excitement behind that, and to see Lee Carroll channeling in your mentors and friends' basement. That's got to be something surreal. I remember I'd never heard of any of these channelers ever. Like the first couple I ever heard of was Jane Roberts, Daryl Anka, Lee Carroll, and that was about the only ones that were really available online that were easily accessible and searchable in 2010 when I started channeling publicly, and then a couple years before that in 2008. And so it was really an amazing thing to see that. And then I looked at some of their things and I saw 10,000 people watching. I was like, wow, that's great. And I didn't even know, before that channeling was really a thing until I met my own guide and went through my own experience. And this is something we have in common. We both have channeled before. We both have been channelers before. We both have been in and around the channeling community. And something we've talked about personally, I think, is a good thing to talk about. Um, the reason why your own personal self, you had stepped back from channeling. Can you share a little bit about that with everybody and kind of give them the reasoning behind why you've done less channeling and kind of stepped away from that inside of your own circle?
Yeah, oh boy. It's like I still get messages and I'm still in tuned with we can call them, I guess, other entities, forms of consciousness. But I I was starting to witness that there seems to be more of an interest in the messages when they came from something outside of me versus my own inner wisdom. And I struggled with that because I I know that each and every one of us holds the most incredible wisdom within us. It's all within us. We don't actually need to have these answers outside of us, but they're valuable when we can, if we think about it as like you and I are talking. And if someone else were to come into this and it was a round table, and so we can think of like some of these channeled messages as part of the round table discussion that we have with our own higher self and our own friends, and we're just all kind of bringing all these ideas and questions and answers together. But when I started to see that, my numbers on my channel were more dependent on if it was maybe a channeled message or not. And, most people I think would be like, wow, I guess I'm just going to put out more channeled messages then because it gets me more views. And I actually gravitated towards the opposite end. I, and it was because this is an actual personal choice of mine. I didn't want to feel dependent on someone else's message to be the highlight of my work. Like, I want my work to be mine and for it to stand on its own. And if it means that I get less views or less people, that's okay. I just want to stay true to myself and not feel, because okay, this is the thing. If I were to do that, it's creating actual codependency relationship with another form of consciousness in this belief that whatever they're saying is better than mine, or um just in a sense of like how we can perceive things, because we work so linearly, like down here. Not that it is or it isn't, but it just, for me, I wanted to make sure I stay true to myself, and that I want my work to really stand on its own. Not that I still don't put out messages of that nature, because I think they're valuable. I just didn't want to lean into dependency on it, because I find that we can often, especially when you're new to this and it's exciting and it's like, oh, what's coming through? And of course, some of the information is so wise and so sage. And so, you take it on and it's just beautiful. But sometimes we can get into this pattern where we give it more credence than just our normal conversations with one another down here, and we're the ones experiencing all of this. So I that's kind of where I move. So I don't know how you feel about it, Rob, because I
Well,
know you
no.
do like beautiful channel. I love your channeling.
Well, I appreciate that. And no, this is actually one of the harder topics to talk about because I am a channeler by profession, a channeler by trade, and a channeler by heart. I have two major loves in my life, and my family is my first, and channeling is my second. And one of the reasons I started this show back in 2015, 2000, actually, no, Jesus, 2013, was because I wanted to be able to be a part of the conversation. Treb and Aridif, I channel through trance, and they have these beautiful things to say, but I also have insight that they don't. I live on Earth. I live as a human.
Mhm.
They come through me, and they take from my experience so beautifully. Not all channeling does that. And Treb said something when I first did a book with Jefferson Viscardi, and imagine I'm coming out of this drug addictive lifestyle when I first entered my spiritual journey. My life was don't trust anyone, because if you do, you're going to get robbed, killed, beat, whatever. You have to protect yourself 100%. And then I meet this gigantic reptilian being, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? Right. So instantly, my instinct is to distrust. And that's why it took me 2 years of communicating with him before I put it publicly. But when, after a year of working publicly with him, so 3 years of knowing him all together, he said something that made me fall in love with him even more. And at that point, I considered him like a best friend. And he said, quote, and this is Treb saying this: if you follow your heart's connected directly to your higher self and your soul knows better than anyone for you. It knows better than the wisest or longest living entity in the universe, because it is you. It's a part of you. It's what you need. So follow your heart. You'll never be led wrong. And that made me reconfigure everything that I thought I understood and knew. I had been doing the
Mhm.
same thing that you're talking about, finding this amazing energy from these channel beings and this wisdom, but it's a different perspective. It's a higher level of consciousness, but it's not a higher level of insight for what humans go through in a human experience on Earth.
Exactly. And when you look at, and I think that's so beautiful what he said. I love that. I love that so much. We look at our world right now, and each and every one of us is succumbing to the fact of just giving our power away to all different kinds of authority, all different kinds of information, all different kinds of belief systems. And this is why we're in the state that we're in right now in our world today. And it doesn't matter what side of the fence you think you sit on. We're all like, we've all at some point, even still, giving our power away in some way. And a lot of it, we don't even realize how we're doing it. And that's why, for this, it's so easy to give your power away to, let's just call it, say, a different form of consciousness giving you advice. And yet that form of consciousness isn't actually living in a body here on earth and going through all of the, experiences that you experience. And so there's value in that. But ultimately, you've got to know your own internal GPS system to make the right decision for you, because it's your journey. And every choice you make brings you in a different direction or a similar direction, and we have to have ownership over that. And so maintaining like your own sovereignty is also part of that, and that's another reason why I pulled away from it a little bit. Again, I'm not saying I don't use it. I don't think people shouldn't use it. It's just to be very mindful of maybe when we lean on it too much and give away some of our power and our own sovereignty.
Yeah, and that's something too, that when I work with people, I try to share with them. A lot of people who are newer, like you said, they're excited. They come into our community. It's still very much a honeymoon phase of their spiritual journey, and I try to explain to them, any channel being. I'm not talking about just Trebinar. Any being that you ever speak to who's a channeled consciousness, they will give you great insights, and they can give you understandings that might be hard for you to achieve on your own, but they can't even give you that without you having it first, because all they do, especially now, this is specifically Trebinarda, the way they connect with your consciousness, they're connecting with your higher self, your lower fractal consciousness, all of the energy that's around, the mental body, emotional body, and they reflect back the answer that's already in you. So they can't even know that without the answer being in you. And this is something you find in a lot of things. Plant medicine.
Mm.
spiritual medicine, all of these things, they show you what's already there.
Mhm.
So if anything these beings tell us is true, which I assume it is, because otherwise I wouldn't continue to channel, then imagine my soul as an infinite consciousness, part of creator consciousness, which has access to everything that they do. And just because they're focused in a higher part of themselves doesn't mean that I can't achieve that inside myself too. And it's funny, after channeling long enough, and maybe it's part of the information that runs through me, maybe it's part, but like 90% of the questions people ask when I'm listening and editing, I already know the answer to. I'm like, yeah, I
Mhm.
knew that. And my
Mhm.
intuition helps me get there. Even
Mhm.
they have to use the psychic ability, the intuition of the human to even function as a person who can read another's energy without just directly connecting to them. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are involved in the bigger picture. And I think that you're right. I think them being part of a tabled discussion with yourself, with your higher self. When I teach channeling, I tell everyone, if you want the best channeling ever, you have to go to your higher self first. And the higher self will help you find the beings that are best fit for you, that aren't going to trample on your free will, that aren't going to tell you, the worst thing I hear in a channeling is you must do this.
Mm.
You have to do this. No. And this is one of the things, this is one of the biggest fallouts I had with so many people in our community, was during the 2019, 2020, 21 era, seeing these people who I had spent time with for years, channeling information that says, trust yourself, be who you are, connect to your heart. That's what is best for you. Into, if you don't wear a mask, you're going to die. If you do wear a mask, you're a sellout. And I'm like, what? I
Mhm.
know that channel being isn't saying that. And if it is, it wasn't a very nice being to start with. So why is this happening now? And it's because it was such an intense time for everybody.
Mhm.
Seeing that from an outside perspective does a number on people, because people have learned to trust channeling so much that when they hear something like that, even if it's against everything in their body, everything in their mind, they might act on that. And that's where I drew the line. I'm like, that's where I started speaking up. Like, you guys, if a channel message tells you to jump off of a bridge, do not jump off that bridge, guys, because channeling is not a science, it's an art. And there are people
Mhm.
who do it well, and there are people who do it bad, and even people who do it good can filter if it's on a subject that's so important to them, that
Mhm.
they will crack inside of that. So there's lots of reasons why channeling is amazing, but also you have to use your discernment. It's the high priority.
Yeah, very well said. And I think that that is like ultimately, if everyone could kind of just conceive of there being a consciousness roundtable where you show up and your higher self is at the head there with you, and then you invite whatever, maybe it's your guides, it's a certain star system of beings, whether it's the Pleiadians or the Arcturians or whoever it is, right? And you invite them in and it's a collective conversation. It's not about you being told what you need to do, which I think is why we initially kind of reach out, is because we're so uncertain. We don't know what to do and we're so scared of making the wrong move or going off the path, And ultimately, there's not going to be any wrong decision. There may be detours, there may be ones that get you through things sooner than others, but whatever you choose, ultimately, you're making the right choice for yourself because there's something out of that that you need to get. So I think treating it more like a round table is the way to go. And if people could really grasp that concept when they're listening to channeling and take that in as just like, oh, another piece of information that I can add to the conversation, and then, have this open discussion with myself about what feels right and what doesn't.
Absolutely. I think that's, in my opinion, that's the most healthy way to approach channeling and everything in life, really. If you have a source of information or energy that you find so dear to your heart, you have to challenge it regularly. You have to be a part of that decision making and the part of the expression of that. Because if you're not, spiritualism, spirituality, channeling, all these things can be just as dogmatic as religion. And a lot of people also prey off of that. The people who teach for money, and I don't want to judge anyone. I try my hardest, so hard not to judge, and I do. I'm human, obviously, but sometimes I see people using the tools of manipulation, like holding people hostage emotionally. Hey, this is ascension time, everybody. If you don't do what our program tells you to, if you don't get into this group, if you don't be a part of our clique, you may be impending doom. You're going to have to repeat third density over and over and over again. I'm like, what?
I
What?
know. I just,
No, no, that's not how it
it's not
works.
how it works. No, I
No.
know. And it's just, and it's so easy though to fall prey to that when you're new to this and you're opening up, and because you want to be a sponge, you just want to absorb everything. And you go in with like these bright eyes and like very low filter, because you want to believe that everyone's coming from the best intention. And I think for the most part, I think people are, but let's face it, we're all human. We all kind of stray off the path from time to time. And I think that was one of the things that just drove me nuts when I started seeing like people were telling, like dropping comments in my underneath my videos sometimes of like, well, what do you think about this person saying that if you don't get the vaccine you won't ascend, or if you do get the vaccine you won't ascend? And I'm like, what? And I'm like, how does that work? Like, what is ascension then? Does it dependent on something physical outside of you, whether you take it or you don't? And then again, like all that's basically telling you is that there's something outside of you more powerful than you. And now you've given your power away. And what do you think 2020 and 2021 was all about? It was because we've all given our power away to all these different ideas and things outside of us, when ultimately we should have been holding it within us. And so it was interesting to kind of observe. I think it was a huge teaching moment for all of us, and it continues to be a teaching moment, that we're all at varying different parts of our own journey, and we're all going to experience so many different things even at those different parts. And so, you know, you've just got to be the witness. And in order to be the witness, we have to be able to understand what our emotional attachments are, what our ideal attachments are, and then ultimately being able to find that neutrality, that space of neutrality, and be able to look at everything from that place, and where we maybe need to detach from, that could be perhaps putting on some blinders to a truth that we all say we want to know.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And it's funny too. This year span, this time, 2021, is something that Treb and Aridif had been talking about since 2010. Speaking loudly about it. 2012 was a big deal back then, and they were saying 2012 is just the middle point of a cycle. It's a 9-year previous, 9-year post cycle. And at the end of that cycle, everyone will have ascended to the next level of consciousness. And what does that mean? What that means is that everyone will have gone through the experience they need to go to start working from the level of heart. And even though it's not going to change, not everyone on December 21st of 2021 is going to wake up and say, hey, we're going to start thinking about each other now instead of ourselves. It will be a place where the collective gives the opportunity to open that energy up. And I expected something a little crazy, but I did not expect what we got. Besides that energy of perception, self-perception, self-truth, understanding yourself despite what everyone's telling you you have to be, should be, need to be, what other things did you see within that period, that 3-year period that's just been so shifting for everyone? I mean, what do you think that it held besides the self-evident truths that we have and all of those things?
Well, I mean, the one thing that's so obvious to me, and I hope others are seeing this, is the awakening is absolutely in high speed motion. Like people are waking up. And when we say waking up, I mean just really understanding that there's more. There's more than we've ever understood. There's more to this truth. There's more to this reality. There's more to this life. There's more to the heart. There's more to this idea of consciousness. And I am seeing that no matter how everything has played out, it has absolutely created massive shifts in the levels of consciousness on this planet. And I mean, I just on Saturday, I did a 9-person meditation on Zoom with a bunch of people. A couple of people I knew, the other ones I didn't. I met them for the first time. And everyone's kind of, for the most part, everyone was in corporate, but they were all doing like really into this galactic stuff and the channeling. And I was like, wow, it's everywhere. It's not just in our community. It's just our community is really open about it. This is kind of the safe space where, you can do this and you're going to be accepted. But it's happening in all different sectors of industries and societies and socioeconomic statuses. Like, people are waking up and there are massive shifts that are happening. I think the problem is that we tend to think that there's going to be this one wave of like where it all just shifts, where that's never how anything really truly happens for the most part. Yes, we have these instantaneous, like, oh my gosh, I get it now, like these aha moments, or we can have spontaneous healing. But to think of that on a global scale, like it's going to happen across the world, is, I think, removing a necessary part of the journey that many of us, when we get caught up in this idea of like a wave of just awakening happening all at once, is that we forget how important parts of the journey within that, when it doesn't happen so spontaneously, is to our actual growth and maintaining that growth.
Oh, absolutely. It's something that has always kind of made me giggle a little bit, how people process some of the things they do, and not in a judgmental way, but just a lot of the people in our community have always infighting. There's the conspiracy theory part of our community, the UFO truther community, even as far as the flat earther community, channeling community, astral projector community, all these different communities. And sometimes they just fight with each other about things. But what I've come to realize a long time ago is that these parts of our own selves are all leading to the same path. They're leading to the self-understanding, the spiritual aspects, the growth spiritually, and understanding the world around you better. And even though they started different, they usually lead to the same place. 20% or more of the people who I do sessions with came from the conspiracy theory area. And they grew out of that energy, out of the fear part of it, to just an understanding of the way certain things might work, or an understanding of themselves and why that fear was there to start with. And then they come right back into that same place. So it is a community, and it is held together by a desire to know more, a desire to understand bigger and better things. And on that scale, awakening has happened in huge levels. You have people, talking about the UFO things that are happening in the government. Yes, in our community, it's a little laughable. They're just getting to the parts where they're admitting it. They're just saying, oh, yeah. And we've known this forever. But there are people on Earth right now who, just because the US government did it and the US is looked at as the world power of things, people are saying, wow, if the US government says it's real, it's got to be real. And they have been on the fence or on the denial side of that part. So imagine how many millions, tens of millions, maybe even a billion people had shifted their perspective, even if just 5%, even if just 3%. The consciousness of the world is growing. And something I saw within the pandemic, within all of that, there's something that was said through the channeling that really resonated with me, is that people are starting to see the holes in the boat. They saw that as a society, as a Earth, we're kind of sinking. And if we don't plug those holes, if we don't figure out what we see that's wrong with the communities, the larger community as a planet, those things will never get addressed. So what happened? People started examining the medical communities. They started examining The spiritual communities, they started examining themselves, the school systems, all these things that had such high levels of brokenness to them, and they start examining it. And even though a lot of people came to different conclusions on all of those things I just said, they still had to think about it. Who else before that had to think about how politics works in the United States? Hey, you vote for someone, they get in office. No, you got to see the working parts, the cogs, the brokenness on both sides of the table. You got to see the medical industry and how certain parts of it are super compassionate, wanting to help so many people and love the collective so much that they would give of themselves, to the other part of it trying to money grub and be horrible to each other and one up each other. And you got to see really both sides of this beauty if you took the time to look at it. And of course, the division that happened, some people only could look at one side, but that was more than what they were looking at. I say that's a win all across the board.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's only in those tough and chaotic times where our character is truly tested, right? And so we as humans started to really start to see what our society actually is like when we're tested. And all of us, all of us probably had something where we're like, "Oh, wow. I didn't I got to look at that in myself," and so that becomes a macrocosm within our society. And I know there were certain things I needed to look at within myself. And I'm very grateful for that mirror. Very grateful for the mirror that the world gave each and every one of us. And I think it's important that um, my big takeaway from all of that is that polarization is the root of separation. And it's not that it's not necessary. You kind of have to have it in some way to understand things, but to hover in the polarization of one side or the other doesn't exactly give you the best vantage point of seeing everything from the highest perspective. So, where is the best place to see everything? Usually from the middle. Now, does it mean like you're just supposed to ride the fence all the time? No. But I mean, when you really want to look at the truth, you need to be able to see the whole landscape very clearly versus being on one side or the other. And it's a challenge, especially for a lot of us who claim to be truth seekers. I think it exposed a lot of our biases, and maybe that there are certain things we don't want to see. And there were certain things I know I didn't want to see, and I had to see them. And that was more growth for me. And I think that's something a lot of us probably experienced.
Oh, absolutely. I've always been a person accused highly of fence sitting because I genuinely try to take a look at everything happening. And um, you're right. There, you have to make a decision, you have to make actions, and you have to look at things. But I believe, uh, and maybe this is just channeling beings who have taught this for as long as I have, has instilled in me. But I really try to be as neutral as I can about everything because honestly, I think that if my biases become heavily one-sided, or even if they're just slightly one-sided, there are things I'm missing, and I don't want to miss anything. I want to see the world through the lens that I can respect what I find and know that that's an actual answer instead of one that someone's force feeding me, one that someone's just giving me. Every political talking point that you had in the whole year of 2020 and 2019, I just went into full blast and everyone was pissed at me. I had a friend of mine who's a dear friend of mine, someone I've known for a long time, just quit talking to me because the way I was telling them, I really don't want to vote for any of these elections because I really, don't see any validity in the process here with all the things that are going on. To me, the perspective of the game itself became overwhelming, so I would pick holes on every side, and each time I picked that side, the other side celebrated, and the side was pissed, and then I went to the other side and then now I got the same people who were telling me I'm a jerk a week ago were clapping hands and praising, and the other people. But I'm really trying to see it, and you can't see it unless you look genuinely at as much as you can. And of course, we all have those biases,
Mhm.
and that will never stop. But I really think the center point, as far as you can go with things that are really out there and really important, if you don't get as central as you can with them, I think you'll miss something. And even if it's not something that would change your mind ultimately, it's still something that you should address, or at least perceive or try to.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it's a constant, like it's really an art, that we as humans need to master. And it doesn't make you a bad person if you do fall into one camp or another from time to time, or maybe for a really long period of time. It's just part of the journey. But it's, one of the things that I'm really realizing is that it takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy to be in that polarization. You don't realize how much energy it actually takes from you, because you constantly have to feed it in order to sustain it. And when you just were like, whatever, let it be. And I don't need to give it my energy anymore. I don't need to worry about if it is my strong belief or not. That place of neutrality actually allows you to harness more energy for the things that you actually are here to do, and live life in a more sustainable and happy way that is in alignment with your soul blueprint. So that was one of my realizations, was how much energy was actually taking from me to actually be more polarized. I didn't realize it at first until I stepped out of it. And then I was like, oh wow, I actually feel better. And oh wow, I don't want to give my energy to that anymore. And now I have it to give to this. And it just, state of mind, state of being, everything just got so much better. And so for me, that was definitely a great learning lesson.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful way to see it. I never really thought of that, but when I look back at the examples I was just giving, each time I started landing on a subject and it started tilting one direction, I would feel my energy leaving me. And it wasn't just because there were so much arguments that we had. And I wasn't even really saying it on social media to say it to others. I just had to express it because it was so frustrating to see
Mhm.
all the mixed signals that were coming to the collective, and how people were latching on and just hating each other because of it. Because that's one thing I really don't agree with, is people tearing each other apart for literally thinking differently.
Yeah.
And it was so hard for me to see loved ones doing that to each other, to me and Kalina, and just everything. So it took so much of my energy away. It was exhausting. And I remember just having, I would have to shut social media down for days at a time. And I try to do that anyway, but at least be somewhere actively present, so that people have the opportunity to communicate or connect. But it just got so bad. I literally shut it down for like 9 or 10 days one time, which is unheard of for me. I'm close enough to a millennial where that I'm right there on the ex millennial
Yeah.
border. So I guess I have more of that in me than I should. But yeah, it was crazy. And I want to thank you for being. I love how this is what I was talking about earlier. You're one of the most honest people, and one of the people who approaches these conversations with the frankness that's needed. And this is a reason I appreciate you greatly, and one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on too. So thank you for that. And I do want to switch gears a little bit. You had an experience recently that was very moving for you. I haven't had a chance to watch the whole video. Kalina did. I perused through it a little bit, but I didn't want to get too much of a preconceived notion, because I knew we'd be talking tonight. This ayahuasca journey that you had, and it was
Mhm.
something you documented fully, something that you became extremely vulnerable and extremely intimate in sharing, how this occurred, what occurred with it, the thoughts that occurred, the expectations you had, and how they were destroyed into a million little pieces.
Yeah.
Um, can you share with us a little bit about that? Because I think plant medicine is a natural concept that is really gifted to us by the earth to help open up places that have sat stagnant in us, or places that we haven't paid attention to, or just things that we've developed our consciousness around in the environment we are as society sits today. And it's really a great tool to open some of that energy. Can you share with us a little bit about what happened, and kind of your experience through that?
Yeah, I want to say first of all, plant medicine is going to become, over the next 10 years, something that is much more accepted and readily used amongst the general population. However, that being said, because we as a society like to do the trendy thing, and plant medicine is definitely becoming a trendy thing, it's so important to approach it with the sacredness that it deserves and the highest level of consciousness that you can bring to it, because I firmly believe that whatever consciousness you meet your plant medicine with is the level of consciousness you will be met with.
Yes.
So that being said, I think it's a very sacred journey. It's something you need to be certain you're ready for, and you need to really know what your intentions are going in. And for me, my intention was to open my heart. I really wanted to open my heart. I knew there were things that were still like weighing on it, blocking it. And of course, as always, like for me, I just wanted to go deeper. I wanted to love deeper. I wanted to connect deeper in all my relationships. I was like, what's still holding me back? And I, of course, with all the things I had heard about ayahuasca, I was like, man, I'm going to get these amazing visions. I'm going to have the most like off the charts DMT experience. And my meditations, for the most part, up until a couple of years ago, were extremely DMT induced through my own production, like through breath work and just my own ability to release it. And so I always had very strong visuals in my meditations. But for the last couple of years, I hadn't. And so I was kind of like, I feel like somehow this is going to like, whatever is kind of blocking me there. I don't know why that happened. And I didn't get any visions on my ayahuasca journey. However, ayahuasca definitely gave me everything I needed in alignment with what my intention was. And everything really aligned, Rob, for me in so many different synchronistic ways that I just could have never organized or orchestrated on my own. There was so much divine orchestration that came through this entire journey and how it came to be. The shamans that I ended up using, the brew that they made was under the full moon in Libra, which is ruled by Venus, and my whole thing was about relationships and opening the heart. And so I'm like, oh wow, literally the brew that I'm taking was formulated under the very energies of what I need for opening my heart right now. And so this all kind of worked out where I had a very unique brew of ayahuasca, or let's even say roots. So they use the Colombian vine of ayahuasca. And from what the shaman told me the next morning was that the Colombian vine acts a little differently than the Peruvian, in that the Peruvian vine, possibly even also the Ecuadorian vine, will give you more of the visions. And I want to say, I think it's also in the way it's prepared. But the Colombian vine, in the way the shamans use it, is much more for the detox and the clearing and the healing. So it's not that you can't get the visions, but they're much more focused on that. And so I definitely got a healing detox that night. And they gave you a very high dose of ayahuasca compared to most. So it was 3 cups within 3.5 hours. And usually you do 1 cup within 4 to 5 hours. And then they ask you if you want to do a second cup and continue your journey on. And so the fact that we were doing
Wow.
3 cups within 3.5 hours of one another, our bodies were getting hit hard with this brew. And the first one that I took, I actually didn't feel so bad. There were moments of nausea. I was able to breathe through it. Quite a few people were already vomiting. And like obviously leaving the fire circle and going into the jungle, because we were deep in the jungles of Mexico, just north of Tulum. And so I was like, and it's interesting because I had to really keep my ego in check at a couple times. There's a couple moments where I could feel myself saying to myself, oh yeah, I see, Nicole, you're good. You did all the detox. Like everyone else is getting affected and you're totally fine. You see, everything's going to be great. And then all of a sudden this wave of nausea would come in. I'm like, right. Okay. Humble yourself, Nicole. Do not get ahead of yourself. Anything can happen. And so I got to the second cup an hour and a half later, and I was ready for it. And so I took it, and Oh, it just tasted so bad the second time. Like the first time it was not great, but the second time it just tasted so much worse than the first time. And you almost wanted to like, it was so hard to get it down. It's thick. It's thick like mud. And so within about 20 minutes, I knew that I was definitely not escaping the detox. And so I proceeded to get my pail, my bucket, and head into the jungle and experience the most violent vomiting of my entire life. I didn't even know it was possible to vomit like this. And it just, I had to keep repeating to myself, because this was something I really wanted to make sure I embraced, was, Nicole, you're here, surrender, you're safe, embrace it all, embrace it all. Because I have a really actually big aversion to vomiting. Like I hate it. And so I had to get over that. And while I was vomiting so violently, the one thing I was so aware of was that it didn't feel like it was coming from my stomach. It all felt like it was coming from my heart. It felt like my heart was throwing up. And I could, the one little vision that I did have that I was able to see in my third eye were like these black clouds kind of coming out of my heart or just being released out of me. And I knew in that moment that something unconsciously detoxed from me. And I think that's one of the things that we maybe forget with the ayahuasca, is that its job is to actually cleanse out our unconscious mind. And there were things in there that I just didn't fully understand how much they were affecting me. I made it then to my third cup, which I was really excited about, because I was told that if you make it to your third cup, you'll likely have your visions. And so I was like, all right, I'm a trooper. I got through it. Here come the visions. And I had to go up to this yoga studio where it was screened in from the mosquitoes, because I just couldn't get comfortable with all the mosquitoes out in the jungle. And so I went up there and I was exhausted, because obviously my body had just been through a very exhausting experience. And I there was a moment where the visions, like something was starting to happen, but I was so uncomfortable. I was so exhausted that I was like, I just want to like lie on my side. And so I turned over, and this is about an hour and a half into the third cup, sorry. And another huge wave of nausea just hit me out of nowhere, like a runaway train. And I knew, Nicole, you're not going to breathe your way through this one. This one, you need to get back downstairs where your bucket is, go back into the jungle. And so I did, and of course proceeded to have another violent experience. And I didn't realize that it was possible for this much stuff to come out of me. Like I was like, where is all this stuff coming from? Because I was eating pretty clean prior to, I'd cut out all the things that they tell you to cut out for 10 days. I had a really light breakfast in the morning, and now it's like almost 24 hours later. And so I'm like, where is all of this coming from? Uh, when it came to the closing ceremony, it was now 6 o'clock in the morning, and we're all sitting around the fire, and they're kind of just doing some closing things with each and every one of us. And I was just ready for it to all be over, to be honest. I had been through the ringer. It was extremely exhausting. I was disappointed because I didn't get the visions that I thought I was going to get. But then something really beautiful happened, and one of the guys picked up a guitar and he started playing it, and he started singing in Spanish. And as soon as I heard the word amore, because I don't really know Spanish very well, but I heard amore or more or something like that. A wave of emotions hit me out of nowhere, and I burst into tears. And all of this tears and emotions just kept coming out of me, and I couldn't stop it. And I was like, you know what, Nicole? Just let it flow. And I cried into my hands until it stopped. And in that moment, I knew for sure that ayahuasca delivered. I just didn't know exactly what happened. So fast forward to I get back, I leave Mexico, I get back, and now I'm like really considering doing a psilocybin journey, which I was gonna do before ayahuasca, but I didn't want to do it before. I wanted to wait. And then something inside of me was telling me, Nicole, just do it now. You've been cleaned out by the ayahuasca. Your body is so primed for this now. And there was something just really telling me I need to do this now. And so prior to the psilocybin journey, which then happened 6-7 days after the ayahuasca, there were some things that I started to notice that were very clear to me. One was that I felt a lot softer, and I felt much more connected, not just to myself, but to just everything and everyone around me. I wanted to connect with even just strangers. I wanted to experience that humanization. And that was something different for me, because usually I can just get caught up in my tunnel vision and just like, I got to go somewhere. I'm very type A personality. I'm like, let me just get to my destination. And then, I'm kind of that way. And this way was just, I felt a lot softer. And then 1 or 2 days later, I noticed that there are certain fears and anxieties that I've been having for the last couple of years that I couldn't shake, and they would come up at certain points. And this was one of those points where it would absolutely surface with a vengeance. And I wasn't experiencing any of it. And I'm like, hold on a second. I'm supposed to be anxious right now. How come I'm not? And I'm like, where are the fears? Why aren't they here? This is happening tomorrow. So why am I not? And I'm like, wow. And I observed my mind wanting to connect my heart and body to the fear or the anxiety. But my body and my mind were just like, no, we're not doing this. We have no attachment to that anymore. Like it's not here. And so I don't know what got cleared out there, but I'm so thankful for that. I've been sleeping a lot deeper. My dreams have been incredible. And so then I do the psilocybin journey, and it becomes one of the most transformational moments of my life, in a sense of how much my awareness was completely blown open. And, you know, long story short, I had the most incredible visions on this journey. I had the most incredible heart opening. I saw everything that I needed to see that was standing in my way on my path of between me and my dreams and my biggest heart's desires. Everything was standing in my way. I saw it. I was able to clear it. I knew exactly what I needed to do once I did clear it. And I also understood um, a very deep unconscious block around my ability to receive more than I've ever been able to receive. And it all stemmed in with my father, but I s- I didn't realize how much I was doing it in my everyday life, like that how that unconscious belief was playing out, where to the point I've noticed now, since doing that journey a little over a week ago, that I have a tendency to say, "Oh, it's too much. Oh, I can't handle it. Oh, just not it's too much right now. Just shut it down." And I'll just stop whatever it is that I'm doing, or I won't talk to this person or whatever. And I'm realizing how much that's shutting down my ability to actually receive the things that I've been wanting to receive, because if I'm wanting to receive more abundance, that's more energy, which means it's going to come in probably a bit of an overwhelming way for me at first, until I start to actually accustom myself to it, and what's the word, recalibrate myself to it. So I wasn't doing that. I wasn't allowing myself to recalibrate, and so now I am, and I've caught myself several times a day doing it. I'm like, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that. It was just so like in my face and so obvious. So incredible breakthroughs that came through that have just blasted open my heart. So now when I go into meditation, or even with my client sessions, like my pineal gland is so active. I'm seeing so much more. I'm getting much clearer messages. My heart is so much more open. And it's like, I also, I also realized yesterday that I'm still in the journey, because I am getting woken up from my dreams with so much clarity. I'm still being shown my life as a puzzle, and all of these puzzle pieces coming into one section, and all of a sudden the picture there makes so much sense. And then it draws it to the points where in my current life of why that's happening. And I'm like, oh my God, it makes so much sense now. That's why that's happening. And it's like, and so I'm still getting all this awareness coming through. And so I'm like, wow, this is a lot. And see, I almost just said it. I don't even, sometimes it's overwhelming me, but I'm like, I've got to get accustomed to this. Cause I want it. I do want it. So I got to get accustomed to it. So it's been an incredible journey, Rob.
Yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like, first of all, the hardships in finding shamans who aren't just local to a place where indigenous people do these things. I noticed that that was kind of a big issue with a lot of people who go through ayahuasca. It sounds like you found a great team to work with you there.
Mhm.
Is it a place that you would recommend? And if so, would you give us the name?
So the shamans that I use, they're from Colombia. I think they're traveling through Mexico. But you know what? Their name is Priya Yananda. Priya Yananda. He's on Instagram. And why don't I like give you the link after the show and you can post it in the comments or the notes below.
Yeah.
Um, but I know that they're working with the location that they had this ceremony at, and it's called um, I don't know, it's Ecomal property, and it's like an eco-friendly retreat lodging yoga center kind of thing, where they have a bunch of different rooms that you can stay at, beautiful grounds, and everything's kind of built into the jungle. So they're doing more ceremonies there. So following Ekamal, which is EKUMAL, on Instagram, you'd be able to kind of see like when they might be having other ceremonies. Um, and Yeah, but I will get you the shaman so that if anyone wants to know, because I was very, very grateful for their work. And he was instrumental in when I was in my very vulnerable stage of vomiting. He came over to me and did some incredible work over me. Also, I got like deep tissue massage when I was finally done. He did a bunch of different stuff. And so I was really impressed because I really needed it. I didn't realize how much I needed it, but that care, that healing was so necessary.
Yeah, it's very rare from what I've heard from a lot of people who haven't got the right person first and had to explore many times. It's very important to find the right person to help guide you through that, because doing it on your own, not a great idea. Doing it in a group of people who are there to get high, not a great idea. Just
Mm-mm.
a lot of these things that are there. But the amazing insight that you found through that journey is huge. And Kalina did link in the chat the direct video for that, guys, as well as Nicole's channel too. So you guys can check that out personally. We're getting close to question time, everyone. So anyone in the chat who has a question, you can get those ready. Please capitalize the word question or put a big Q in front of the question so we know it's a question. That'll be really helpful. The insights that you had are amazing. This is something I have only ever done psilocybin with the mushrooms, and I did it well before my spiritual journey. So for me, it was about getting high and about
Yeah.
getting ripped. But one thing that was very unique, it was a side effect that I did not expect at a time where I couldn't stop taking Oxycontin and morphine because I would become violently ill and go into withdrawal. Um, I took these, and at that time, during that whole day, I never wanted any. And then the next day,
Mm.
I didn't want any. And the third day, I wasn't puking my brains out. And when I was in that zone, I became very intellectual and had huge insights that I never would have had otherwise. Also, in a mind that was very foggy, and a mind that was very drug induced before. Um, since I started my journey, my spiritual journey, I smoked pot a couple times. I used to smoke it every day, but then I took a couple years away from it, and then I did it a couple times, and that was not very helpful for me. It just put me to sleep and made me a little paranoid. So I haven't touched it since. But I've always wanted to revisit that as something me and Kalina had considered, and then right when we had found a means to do that, we found out she was pregnant. So we're like, well, it's going to have to wait a couple years. So
Yeah.
this was something that's beautiful for me to hear from someone who's also gone through a huge spiritual journey on their own, who's had great insights on their own, and then used it as a tool. And this is something, to guys, that I very much would say, I'm on the same alignment with Nicole. Don't take any of these types of things if you're not ready emotionally, spiritually. Have good intentions, be around people who are well versed, and be around places that are safe where people can check up on you and make sure you're doing well. Because
Hmm.
in my experience, just taking it for fun, if I was worried about something that day, or if I was emotionally uh, going through something very heavy, the experience would take you into a bad place, because you're yourself are in a bad place. So it's very, very much can see how you on that level, ayahuasca could be that much more potent. So thank you for sharing that. And I really would love to talk even more about that. We're getting a little shorter on time. What I wanted to do is something that I do with all of our guests too. At least I have been, since Daryl Anka was our guinea pig on that. So it's called the lightning round, and I ask you a bunch of stupid questions that are about things that maybe no one's asked you ever in public. So it'd be something you could have. And obviously, if you don't have an answer for it or don't want to answer, you just pass, and we'll go to the next one.
Okay.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Blue. Blue is a beautiful, good answer. A very common answer too. A lot of people love that in our community. It's a good color. Um, what is your favorite food?
Oh, that's interesting. Because my reaction was to say pizza, but I'm like, why am I saying pizza? And then like, that's not true. And I think that's my inner child's response is pizza. But gosh, when it comes to my favorite food, I love food. I love food. And I tend to really love like either a really good fresh fish kind of dish or a steak. So, and that's kind of where I'm gravitating right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, me and Kalina, we've been doing keto, so a lot of steaks in our life.
Yeah. I'm actually considering, and I don't even think I've said this to anyone yet. I'm actually considering the carnivore diet right now. I have someone who's going to be coming on my podcast to talk about the carnivore lifestyle diet. And I've been listening to a lot of the different data over it, and it's quite compelling. And it's I gotta say it's hard to hear as well, because it kind of talks about how vegetables may not be the greatest thing for you. And when you listen to the science, you start to question, like, well, there's maybe something to that. Now, I'm like, when I've for me, I'm just like, for me, truth came through a lot of my health journey. Like a lot of my introduction to things came through my own healing journey. And so I'm constantly like willing to try different things and see how my body reacts to it. I've done the vegetarian thing. It worked for a little bit, but then it really wasn't good for me. And this is not for anyone to think that I'm telling you this is how you should eat or not. I think you need to just do you and listen to you, whatever feels right for you. But for me, like I'm starting to actually consider it, because I've noticed that I feel better when I'm eating more animal protein, and particularly beef. And so I don't know. How are you guys with it? Like, have you noticed any kind of shifts in your own like energy and how you feel in your body?
Yeah, me and Kalina have been through this journey too. I think every person has a body type, and those body types and the consciousness involved are very reactive. We've had a lot of friends who were vegans, raw vegans. Kalina tried it, and she ended up going to the hospital because she was I am going to do this no matter what. People are like, well, you didn't do it the right way, but she followed experts. She when she gets into the dietary thing, she's very knowledgeable. She does her due diligence, and the best that I've ever felt was right when we got pregnant. I don't think we would have gotten pregnant with some of the health issues that we were going through
Mhm.
until we went to the keto diet. Carbs aren't good for us. And when we eat carbs, we blow up, we get sick, we get inflamed. Um, so yeah, to us, I felt better at that time than I had since I was 20 years old. And since then, we're getting back into keto. We'd regressed, but also my health after getting back into the carbs did it again, ankle
Mm.
swelling, back pain, knee pain, all
Mhm.
of it. And as soon as we go keto, it'll clear right up. So yeah,
Yeah.
I really feel, but it's actually something that we had heard in the study that most of the people who are looked at and their bloods looked at are highly protein deficient. The diets that we have don't include a lot of protein, and a lot of things that do have good protein and healthy fat and no carbohydrates. People say, oh, that's not healthy for you. You shouldn't eat steak. You shouldn't eat butter. You shouldn't eat eggs. Yet people who live on just that with the body type that me and Kalina have end up doing well.
Yeah, me
My
too.
blood
I
work
do well on
across the
it.
board was great. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's interesting, and again, I think that there's certain vegans who do it and they thrive on it, and so it's not to say like there's one way to eat. I don't think that's the case at all. But it's just like trying to find out what's right for you. And I know I saw Kalina's comment, about like broken because obviously you're taking a life, but you're taking a life when you eat a vegetable. It's consciousness. Just because it
Yep.
doesn't have eyeballs doesn't mean it's not a living, breathing thing. If you My friend was telling me about the book written, I think it was like 20 years ago or something. It was called like The Secret Life of Plants or something like that. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
So this guy did a study and he had some sort of measurement device that was able to kind of tap in and read the energy of the plants. And every time you would go to like cut a plant down or take a fruit or whatever, it would freak out like energetically. And then when he started to actually talk to the plant and like tell it what it was going to do and be more gentle in its process, it actually it still wasn't happy about it, but it was a lot more calm in its energy. And so I got to get that book. 'Cause I kind of look into it and see more where that information came from. But I mean, at the end of the day, everything has a consciousness. And so, you know, I think it's the most important to honor all life forms here, be grateful, have gratitude for the life that is given. Eventually our life is given to this earth at the end as well, and all of us is recycled back in, and it's part of this process of life and death. And I think maybe we need to return more to an ancestral understanding of the life and death cycle to fully understand what it means to eat in harmony with nature. And I think that, there's been a lot of studies around plants that they give off a lot of toxins when they're killed because that's their defense mechanism. They don't want to be killed. And so they make it harmful for you to actually consume it. And these toxins get ingested by us when we eat these vegetables. And so, you take into that account, it's like, well, it's not a win-win situation any way you look at it, right? So
All right.
it has to come back to our understanding of being in harmony with the death and life cycle and being in a space of honor and gratitude for all life and never taking anything for granted, but also knowing how sacred everything is in the process of it all.
Exactly, and that's the thing that me and Kalina, when going to the keto diet, we both agreed that we're going to only get the food sourced ethically,
Mhm.
grass fed, and make
Yeah.
sure it's purchased from a farm that we can go visit if we want
Yeah.
to make sure that there's no abuse. Because factory farming is a horrid thing, and I think that's why so many people who are vegan are upset by it. Another thing I've noticed, and I know bringing an idea like a race into something is never a great idea, but I've noticed people who have genetic ancestry towards Europe,
Yeah.
people whose ancestors lived in snow, where there weren't a lot of vegetables. do very badly in the vegan diet. I've only met a couple people who have heavy European ancestry that did well with the vegan diet. And I've noticed a lot of people who have ancestry from near the equator, whether it's Asian, Hispanic, African, when their families came from that area, they do beautifully with it. And that's
Mhm.
probably because their bodies were developed from ancestors who were able to eat veggies and fruit all year round, and it never really did anything bad to them. And the same with people from Europe, they were eating meat most of the time during the winter. And they could eat some veggies and things, but if they ate too much, honey that didn't grow in northern Europe down, they didn't have honeybees all the way up and places where it never stopped snowing. Things like that could be more harmful to them. And I know that that's just probably um, a theory that was thrown out there that I heard that sounded right. But I think it has a lot to do with ancestral roots, and it has a lot to do with body types. And if you configure those two, if we can get a science towards that that would show anything, then it would clear diet up, because the one diet fits all people, all things. It's just doesn't make sense to me. Never
Mhm.
has. Yeah, but
I
that's
agree with you.
that's beautiful. Oh yes, questions, lightning round. Okay, let me see. Um, what's the favorite place you've ever been on Earth where you can look around at beauty just for the nature and just say, "Wow, this is the most gorgeous place I've ever been on Earth."
Bali, 100%.
Yeah,
Bali. Oh, yeah. There's something about the rice paddies because it's so different from what I'm used to, and I don't know, there's just something so beautiful about the the fertility of that island and how it shows up in nature and also the culture too, the way the people are with the land. It's really beautiful to observe, and there's a lot of feminine energy in Bali, which is what I needed for like the last 10 years, 15 years of my journey. And so there's something about Bali and its fertility and I want to say majesty, but also it's very magical that you can just get lost in it in a really good way.
it sounds beautiful. I had never considered Bali. I've heard about it, but I don't think I've ever seen a lot of pictures from there or did a lot of information digging on that. I'll have to look into that. It sounds gorgeous.
Hmm. Oh,
Uh,
it's beautiful.
it sounds that way. Last question I'll have for you, because we're running short on time. We'll probably have to cut out part of, if not all the question part, which I apologize for. But let me see what's your favorite band or song, or both?
Oh gosh. I'm so horrible with music. Okay, I'll just say that I love 80s. I'm an 80s girl. I love 80s, and I'm just loving the fact that the 80s trends are all back right now.
Oh yeah, big
It's
time.
just so much 80s influence right now in our culture, which I'm totally loving. But I can't think of all I can tell you is that when I was a teenager, I was in love with Duran Duran, and I had Nick Rhodes posters and Simon Le Bon posters all over my ceiling, my walls, and I was just so in love with them. Him and Corey Hart. So Duran Duran and Corey Hart were like my heart throbs, when I was in the 80s. And that's what's coming to me right now. But I don't know what it is about music and bands and names. I can't remember them ever. But if you play one song, as soon as I hear the first beat, I know exactly what it is. But so it's so funny.
No, absolutely. I know a lot of people that way. I'm the weird person who has dedicated a great part of my brain to lyrics. I love to sing, but I'm horrible at it. But I do. It helps. It makes me feel better. So I sing terribly, but I do. And every song from my favorite band, Ween, I know 90% of all the lyrics to Ween's
Yeah,
multiple albums. It's weird. And like
that's
I go
awesome.
back to the 90s thing and I'm singing with it. And people are like, dude, yeah, you know these guys, like, I haven't heard this song since like 1997, and they're like, what, and you still know all the words? So for whatever reason, my brain's programmed. But Kalina's the same way. She's like, I don't know who sings the song, but I love it. So yeah, I get it completely. So we've run out of time for the questions. Sorry for anyone who did have a question. We apologize for that too. We saw a couple of them go through, but um before we go, I want everyone to know if they're looking to find out something about you, how to get a hold of you, how to get services from you, how to watch your material, or anything that you've got coming up in the next couple weeks, a month, a year that you want people to check out. Where do they go? How do they do that?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. My website, NicoleFrolick.com, is where you will be able to find everything that I've got going on. Services if you want to book readings or coaching, inner child healing. I've also got online courses there that you can take. And then my YouTube channel is just Nicole Frolick. And that's where I also air my podcast every Tuesday night. And I've got I think I've got like 500 videos on my YouTube channel. So there's lots of content to dive into there. And I'm going to be doing an actual webinar probably in later July on alchemizing your money flow, and basically offering everyone like the 11 rituals that I've used that completely transform how I've been able to manifest money, but also maintain it, and not just money, but abundance. And it's about healing the relationship around money, which I think a lot of people have. We have like a traumatized relationship with money. And
Yes.
so, which can also give us a lot of insight into our own personal relationships, believe it or not. So I'll be doing that in July. And then if there's anything that I am going to be putting out, I do so on my newsletter, and you can sign up to my newsletter from my website.
All right, beautiful. Well, I want to say thank you so much for being here tonight. I really enjoyed the chat, and like I said, I admire you as a part of our community that is actually one of the more open, vulnerable, community. Communicative and community based and open-hearted, open-minded, someone who speaks what's on their mind despite how others receive it, and just able to share from that place of honesty and intentions. I always feel have been good for you. And I know most people that run in our community long term who have good intentions are actually the ones that tend to stick around, because people notice that eventually. But out of all the people in our community, you're definitely on that top list for me of people who really are sharing from that place that's legitimate, honest, and desire to have that communication with people. It's a very rare thing. It's very tough in our community to find people like you. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for having these chats, and I appreciate you being here very much.
Oh, thank you for having me on, and thank you for such kind words. I really appreciate them, Rob. And I love the work that you're doing, and Kalina. And so keep doing it, because I love your work as well.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me, and I enjoyed being on your show. If you guys didn't see my episode on Enlighten Up podcast, we'll find the link for that and throw it in the description too. But you can find it by going to Nicole's channel, which Kalina's put up, and is also in the description. Thanks again, Nicole. I appreciate it. One day we'll have you back on for another chat further down the trough, and I really appreciate everything you're doing for everyone.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks again, Nicole. Appreciate it. Everyone, you have just witnessed a wonderful interview with Nicole Frolick. Thank you for showing up to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. This is your host, Rob Gauthier, and this is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network, which we will be having lots of announcements on coming soon next week. You will be able to find me here at 10 p.m. Eastern every week on Wednesday, 7 o'clock Pacific, and next week we will be speaking to the one and the only William Piper, Stadia Pro Gaming, a dear, 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 oldest, dearest friend of mine, a brother of mine, and you will be able to have uh, an admission to that chat is going to be priceless, I guarantee you. A lot of you might not have known him, but if you followed the Enlightenment Evolution Network, he was the person who did Disclosure Now and did interviews on the Billy Myers case with both a fellow named Ruben, and I cannot remember his last name, who was a mathematician who debunked, and I put that in quotes, debunked the Billy Myers case, and then he brought on Michael Horn, the North American representative for Billy Horn. So he got both sides of the story, and it was really amazing show that he did. And he'll be bringing that show back to our network. So I want to get you guys acquainted to him. I also want to thank you, Jessica, for the donation. We appreciate all donations here. Obviously, we do this out of love of our heart, and the donations are appreciated. So thank you so much for that. We love you guys. We will see you next week here, same time, same place, with William Piper, Stadia Pro Gaming. And after that, we'll make many more announcements on new guests that are coming. Thank you all. Love you all. We'll see you on the other side. Bye, guys.